Hello YouTube, hello viewers, and welcome back to another episode of creating our social media API using Laravel. Today we're going to be moving a little bit more deeper into our application. We pretty much now got the whole login system working for our user, but we need to get to a point now so when, say for example, the user forgets their password, we need to know how we're going to manage that and how we're going to actually send the passwords off to that user. So today it's going to be split into, again, a few different episodes. We're going to do it step by step so you can follow through, and hopefully by a few sessions we'll have a full password reset working. So let's get started. So first thing we need to do is currently have a look at our project. So in our auth controller, we've only got a few endpoints here, and that was all for registering and logging in and all sort of jazz like that. What we're going to do is we're going to start adding a few ones in now for password resets. But when you think about the flow of a password reset, normally we get an email sent to that user and saying, okay, well, click this link to reset your password, you get redirected somewhere, and then you then do that. This is going to fall under a few endpoints of ours because we're going to have to follow a few. One would be to obviously create some type of token that we need to set for that user, and that's what we're going to look at in today's episode. The next one will be then once they get that token, what do we do with it? And then obviously the third part of it is going to be like, okay, so we've got that token, how do we go ahead, go about resetting that password? So it's quite an in-depth one, and password resets are quite simple once you do them, and it's not that difficult. So unfortunately, currently inside our database, we don't really have anything that will manage any of this. So we're going to have to create something that's going to manage all our password resets, and it's really dead easy to do. So let's hop over into our terminal. I'll zoom in a little bit so we can see everything that's happening here. And remember, to do anything with our migration scripts, we could just make a model, and then we just attach the flag -m. And we're just going to call this user password. Actually, let's just make it easier. Let's just call it password resets. This probably makes more sense, really. So password reset. Remember, we don't want to have it plural, we just want to keep it non-plural, so we have password reset, and that's going to create us a migration script ready for our project. So just give that a few seconds, and there we go. So it's made our password reset table here. So we need to kind of think what we're going to do with that, or what we're actually going to put inside this table. And really it's dead simple of what we're going to be adding into this. So we want to go into our database folder. Sorry, I'm just closing all these down. So we're going to go into our database folder, into our migrations, and this is our new one that's just been created, the create password resets table. You can see it's already giving us some type of name, which is okay, that's fine for us, but we need to add a few things in. So ID will always be there because we want to refer to something in some way. But then we also want to have another bit of information, not able, it's going to be table. And in this instance, we want to make sure it's a string. And you probably guessed already, but the first thing we want to know is their email address, because the email address is what we're going to be sending the data to, or that's how we're going to know that this is the user that we want to reset. Don't forget, this is a forgotten password. So you know when you normally go onto the front screen of a website and you say, well, I forgot my password, they normally ask for an email, then it gets sent to the email. The password change, however, is slightly different, and we'll look at that, when we get further into the series, so don't really worry about that. And the last thing we're going to add into here is another string, and this is actually going to be a token we're going to set for the user. So very similar to what we did with the other one, where we set the tokens, and remember when we got the user to sign up, we sent off a token inside the email. Very similar thing here, so we can kind of maintain what's going on with the user. So once we have all that in there, obviously this will drop the table if needs be. I mean, at the moment we only need this information. You could put more in if you like, but technically all we need is an email and a token. We don't need a user ID because there's no point to that, because we don't have a user ID at that time. It's just an email. So once we've done that, let's go into our console, and we want to just run, actually I need to go into my Docker container. If you've got one, obviously go into your container. Let me just go into my Laravel project, and I'm just going to run php artisan migrate. I can spell. Yeah, so that's now created my table. I can go into my database, refresh, and I should now have that password resets. Here we go. So email and token. So we just want to do a few bits and pieces whilst we're in here. So we're going to jump into our project, and now we've got this up and running. Let's have a look at our model. So remember, we go to app and it's here. Technically, remember, we should all have these in a folder called model, but I accidentally started this tutorial series without it being in a model. So don't worry about it too much just yet about where your models are right now. You can move them later on if you like. We're going to jump into our password resets, and there's a few things we need to put into here. So remember when we had like this status update, we had this fillable property. We might as well do that now because we kind of learned about it. We might as well do it before we even know we're going to get errors like that. So we're just going to add this thing called fillable, and we're just going to fill in some data. And as you thought, the data we're going to fill in is what was inside our database. So we had this email and token. So email and token is the other one. Okay, so that's pretty much straightforward. You don't have to really do much in regards to that. I mean, it's dead simple. Nothing really needed to be done on that side. So, as I said, this episode we're going to create a token for this, and it's very simple. And we're just going to go into our API routes, and we need to do something here. So, remember we have like all these routes and stuff set up. So we've got this user one. And we've got like register, login, activate, and it's kind of hidden behind an API route here. Again, not much of an issue, but we're probably going to need, maybe we could put in this middleware, it doesn't really matter, or do we put it behind an auth? These are questions you need to ask yourself, but with a reset password, we don't, because auth API is referring to if we are logged in, we need a token. If we're just using this API middleware, we don't need a token technically. We're just using API. And these ones, we didn't need to have any tokens. We could just register a user and log in. So we're going to do the same thing here. In this case, we're going to make some routes for the user. So what we're going to have is going to route, and then we're going to post, because obviously the post is so that we can make these resets. And what we can do is we could create a route for it like we've done with register and login and activate email. We could call this forgot password, like that. Okay, so we can do forgot password, and then it needs to go to our controller. So now we've already got an auth controller. We might as well just use that controller, and it's going to be auth controller. Actually, might as well just copy the whole thing. Makes our life a little bit more easier. And we can just call it forgot password, like so. If you want to make it a little bit more simpler to understand, we could call it forgot password create. This might make it a little bit more easier for you to follow through. That's fine. We'll just keep it that way. It might be a little bit more easier for you to understand how it works. Okay, so now we've done this. Let's see if we can get the route working inside our Postman. So let's get Postman open. You don't see all my other projects that I'm working on with my work. You will just swap that over. Okay, so we're inside our YouTube, and we want to kind of follow the same thing that we have with our post, like login, for example. We're just going to steal this one. So if we just duplicate this, and this is going to be forgot password reset. Okay. And now all we need to do is just put in some information. So we need to think about what we're going to do here. Obviously, it's not users login because we're not logging in. If we look at our routes, we called it forgot password create. So we're going to copy that and paste that into there. Save that. And the only thing we're really going to be passing into this is just an email. So we can just get that and hit save. Okay. So now we've got that set up. The next step that we need to do is we need to work out how we're going to work around this. Now, again, it's dead simple to do this. We're just going to make a function that's going to get this request. Once we got that request, we're going to use it, and we're going to make a token for that user. We also then need to email that user, say, okay, well, you have forgotten your password. You need to do something with it. Dead simple to do. So let's jump back into our project, and we need to make sure we got a function called forgot password create inside our auth controller. So let's jump into our auth controller, and let's make a function. Public function. and forgot password create. And obviously what we're going to be passing in is a request. So we can just quickly steal our request here. Remember, you can make your own request like I showed you in previous episodes. Obviously do that, but for this tutorial series, just to make it a little bit more quicker, I'm just using the request. If you want to know how to make your own, obviously just pop back on a few of my videos and you can see everything happening there. So now we have that. The first thing we need to do is to check, actually, does this email exist inside our, inside our database? Okay. So we can quite simply do something like $check user email equals, and then we can have this user service because we're going to be looking at the user service. And here we've got check user is activated, which is an email. We don't really want to use any of these. So we're going to make our own now. So we can say check, oops, without the capital, check email. Okay, like so. And obviously the request we're going to pass in is request and then email. Now, if you don't remember where that's coming from, it's coming from our Postman and it's called email, and that's what we're passing in. Okay. We can quite easily just copy this like so. We're going to copy that and we're going to pop into our user service. So, and we're just going to make a function for that. So public function. You can see that's very repetitive, but it's a nice little framework to follow. We can just call this $email. Email. Okay. What's going on there? There we go. $email. And now we're just going to jump into the repository and see if they exist. So we can just pretty much copy this and we'll copy this. Oops. We'll copy check email and it's going to go to email. And then what we can do is we can go into the repository contract. So we'll copy this. Again, this is very repetitive. We've been doing this over and over again. So we're just doing the same thing. Public function check email, like so. Oh, we don't need to those, sorry, check email. And then we can put the comment block just so it looks the same. And obviously we need to do this inside our user repository. So public function check email. And because we got something very similar, we can just copy this and paste this in here. Okay. Actually, we could have really used this. I've kind of duplicated code. I could have used this. I didn't know I had access to this. That was my fault, but we could actually just use this information. Actually, let's do that without duplicating code. So let's actually take that out again because we don't need it. Go back to our contract, get rid of this one because we don't need it. And we can just use this one that's already created. So if we go back to our service, our user service, and we can just use check if user exists by email. And this is why it's so good that we can have multiple things that we don't have to keep repeating the same code. And then we can just do if blah, blah, blah. So if the user exists, like so, we can just return true, like so. And if they don't, actually, I want to return that because I want to return the object back. And then if they don't, we just return false. Not $return false, return false, like that. Okay, so it's just really seeing if the email exists. If it does, then we're going to get that back. And then we don't really need to get the object of the user back if we don't want to. We could actually just say true here, and then we can just use the request. We can do that if we wanted to, that's fine. Again, it's up to you. You can return back the whole object of what's going to come back from the query, or you could just say true, and then we can work it from there. So let's just do it that way. So now we know that we have an email. Our next bit is to see, okay, well, what do we do if we don't have one? So remember, we could do something as simple as this and say, well, if we don't have this, so if it came back as false, so if it comes back as false, we can then use our response helper. And this is going to be an error saying, well, this user does not exist. So response helper, and this is going to be an error response. And obviously it's going to be false. And our message is going to be user email doesn't exist, like so. And the error code we can put is just probably a 401. Will do. Okay. So That way we bum out before we get any closer into the application. We'll be like, okay, well, they don't exist, so we can just stop from there. So let's see if we get anything. So if I'm just going to put a die dump here, die dump, and this will say we got this fast, which means we have got a user of that email. If we don't, we should get this error response. So let's give this a go. Let's jump into Postman, send this across, and let's have a look at the preview. It says we got this far because this email does exist inside our database. If I put 99999 at the end of this and hit send, do we have a 99999? That should not work. So, oh, it's because I don't have a return here. Keep forgetting to put returns, and this is bad. There we go. So now you see that we get this return and says user email does not exist. That was because I don't put the return. I keep forgetting to do that every episode. I have to put these returns. Right, so that's one way to check against the email. So now we got this far. We know that the user exists because we get to our die dump here. We need to do a little bit of logic here to then do our passwords. Okay, so really, again, this is not difficult because we've done this over and over again. All we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting a bit of information into our database. However, we know that the database is using a different model, which means we could use a different repository pattern if we wanted to. Again, that's entirely up to you. Or we could just do it inside the controller or inside the service. I'm going to do it inside the service and maybe make another password reset service. Actually, let's do that. Let's just make a password reset service. It's probably easier for us. So what we can do is we need to make a repository, a repository and a contract. So to do that, we just obviously we can copy the status update one. So we can copy this one and we'll just call this password reset service, like so. Add that in, just delete all that information, all this information, all this. So we're just getting rid of stuff we don't need. So we're just making an empty class, and obviously it's called password reset service. And then we need to do the same on our repositories and our contracts. So we're going to just copy the repository. So copy file, and this password reset repository. And we do the same again. We're just going to get rid of everything inside. This is now called password reset repository. We haven't made a contract yet, so we need to make one of those. So if we just copy this one, refactor, copy file, and it's going to be password reset repository contract. And again, we're just going to get rid of this inside, and we're going to call this password reset repository contract. Update our password repository. Oops. Password repository contract. There we go. You can get rid of the unused ones. Okay. And inside our password reset service, obviously we need to plug into our contract. So our password reset repository contract. That's a lot to take in. Password repository contract. And then that's going to be this. Again, we've done this over and over again, so I'm doing this really fast. If you've forgotten how to do it, just refer back to my repository contract lesson, and it'll kind of explain exactly why we're doing this. And then we just need to make sure that it's protected, like so. Okay, let's comment block that out. That, and like so. Cool. Okay, so now we have access to this and we have our password reset service. We're going to go back into our auth controller, and now we're going to do our logic to access that password reset service, which we have to actually add into here. So password reset service, we can copy that, paste that in. Again, I'm doing this really fast because we've done this over and over again. We've done this quite a few times. Protected password reset service, like so. Comment block. Let's comment block this. So we're getting quite a few here, so it'll be quite nice if we can start separating this out a bit, because this line here kind of tells us that we don't go too far. So we're going to do our logic to access that password reset service. So password reset service, we can copy that, paste that in. Again, I'm doing this really fast because we've done this over and over again. We've done this quite a few times. We've done this quite a few times. So we're getting quite a few here, so it'll be quite nice if we can start separating this out a bit, because this line here kind of tells us that we don't go too far. Obviously, we just want to make sure it's nice and neat. There you go. So now we have our password reset service. We can now use that with inside this. And it's dead easy, so up and running. So what we're going to do is we need to make a password reset. So we can call this $create password reset. Okay, and that's going to jump into our password reset service. And inside that service, we can just call it create password reset here. Like so. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. And the only thing that we need to pass in now is just this request email. That's all we need to pass in. Because we know that they have got this email, and we'll get to this part here. Remember I said to you that you can pass in the object. We could have done check user email and email if we wanted to. Again, that could have been another option we could have taken. So now we're in here, we need to create this. So we're gonna grab this bit of information. It's very repetitive. We're gonna go into our service and we're gonna make our function. So public function. Can't even spell today. Function. And we'll paste that in. Obviously that's gonna be just called email. Like so. So $email. And now we just need to do some logic inside this service. And as you know, we're just going to go straight to our repository contract. So we could create new reset equals $this, and then we can just grab that. So we're going to do password reset contract, and we're going to use the same thing, create password reset. And we're going to pass in the email like so. So this is basically sending the information to our repository contract. Remember, that's where we handle all our database transactions. And we're just going to be passing it to this function with this name called email. So we need to put that inside our contract. Public function that. Okay. Obviously give it a nice comment block. Just looks nice and neat, I guess. And then we need to add that into our repository here. So public function, create password reset. And this is where we're going to do all our fancy logic. So we're going to try catch. Remember, I like doing a lot of try catches. That way we can catch anything if we have any issues with our code. So exception, $e. Put our curlies. Again, we've done this over and over again. So don't worry if you're getting too confused. Just jump back to some of my previous videos and they all make sense. Okay, cool. Right, so what do we do now? Well, it's dead simple. We're just going to add some information into our database here with this email and token. So to do that, we can say new reset equals, and then we're going to have password reset. So that's our model. Oh, actually, sorry, I'm doing it incorrectly. It'll be new password reset, like so. And then inside there, we're going to have new reset email is equal to email, like so. And then we need to also create a token. And tokens are dead easy to make. So we can say token. And the token we're going to have very similar to what we've done with all the other stuff. We can just have str underscore random, like so. And we're going to, I don't know, 60 characters long, I guess. So did we use this in somewhere else inside the code base? We have not. I'm sure we made a random token somewhere inside our code base. Let's have a look. I remember we did it in our user service. So when we created a user, so this register, when we registered the user, we had a user repository, user activation token. So we made this token. So this token, we did this string random. So let's just copy the same thing that we did here and put it into our password reset, just so we follow the same code. So instead of string random, we'll just use this one. Okay, so that will make us our token. And then we're just going to save. So, and then all we're going to do after that is we're going to return back our new reset. If we have an error, we can just DD. Remember, we don't really put this into production or anything, but it's for our debugging purposes. So we're going to get message like that. So if we know that something's wrong, we'll get a message back saying we couldn't add it in for some sort of reasons. So now we have that. If we go back, and we can actually return this back. Okay, so return that information back. So we go back another one, and now we have this create password reset. And then what we can do is we can say return this. Okay, so let's see what happens. So let's try and run this. So we want to reset the password for Bob9. So if we hit send, we get not instantiate, okay, because we need to instantiate it. Remember, we do that inside our providers, and in our repository service provider, we need to bind them together because we've made new ones. So password reset repository contract needs to be password repository. And remember, you need to include them up here. My IDE does it for me. And I'm actually going to clean this up because it's starting to get a wee bit messy, and I like my stuff in order. I'm a bit OCD like that. Some people hate me for doing it, but it just makes my life a little bit more better. I prefer it like that. Right, we can do the same here actually. So now that's all bound, and let's hit send. Okay, cool. So look, we get our response back of email Bob. His token's now this token, and we know that we've got an update and create that. So if we look at our database, there is there. So we've got an email and a token. Now we have an emailed user. That's going to be in our next episode, but we do have a response. We need to clean this up a little bit because it is a little bit ugly. So we're going to go back to auth controller, and let's just make sure that we have a good return back. So remember, we have this response helper, success response, and then obviously this is true. Password reset sent, I guess. You can call it whatever, I guess. Just make sure it's in quotes. And then we also want to just pass in this information. This will be different, but for now, for this episode, we're just going to stop at this point because obviously there's a lot in this one as it is. And we now should get a nice success message back. There we go. So now we have a password reset sent, and now we have some nice data back. So that's how we just make it nice and clean. Obviously, we need to think about how do we stop this duplication. We'll do that in the next episode because I think this episode's gone on for long enough. It's coming up to 30 minutes, probably my longest one. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. We kind of did the same things that we've done in most episodes. The only thing that was slightly different is that we did the check, which we got to use some reusable code, which is pretty cool. And all we did is we made a new service this time called password reset service. We made a new password repository contract and a password repository. We binded them just like we did with all of our other repositories. And now we have this perfect thing that comes back with our create password reset. And now we have data coming back. Our next one, we're going to look at adding emails. So we're going to send off the email with the password reset and attach our token to that. And then when they click on it, we can then reset their password. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's been a long one. Apologies for that one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. If you really liked it, hit the subscribe button. And if you really enjoyed it, make sure you share this with your friends. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Goodbye.